Okay, so for today's intro segment, I was gonna do a whole thing with the berry plushies coming back, but whatever, that's not interesting, okay? What is interesting are ants, which is of course going to lead into our brand new segment on the channel, which will be here for years to come, I'm sure. Ant facts! Facts about ants and other insects, but mostly ants. Yeah, okay. So just follow me on this, okay? There is a species of ant called the giant forest ant. It's located mostly in Southeast Asia, around Indonesia, okay? Now, this ant species is probably the biggest ant species on the entire planet, okay? I say probably because there's like 80% of all species on the planet are insects, and we keep finding more and more of them. So at some point, at some time, we'll probably discover a bigger ant, okay? But for right now, these are like the biggest ants. That's not the interesting part, though. The interesting thing is that for some reason, nobody knows why, every now and then at night, these giant forest ants will come together and do what can I only describe as a anime tournament arc. Where they'll get together and they'll fight like in a tournament. They won't try to like kill each other. They'll just like stomp their legs or like clash with their mandibles. And this could last up to a month or even longer, which is very anime-esque. And then they'll just leave and then like, you know, lick their wounds and then come back and then fight again. So they have like nightly anime tournaments that can last an absurdly long time. And they don't actually like, you know, finish off the other ants. So there's your ant fact for today. Ant facts! Okay, so what are we talking about today? Oh, okay. Today's a doozy. Today's a big one. Today, because I made that video a couple days ago on what are all the major antagonists and villains in One Piece up to, a lot of people questioned, well, what about Rox? What about Roxy Xebec? You know, okay, he could very well be the greatest enemy in all of One Piece. I mean, if he's still alive, he probably is, and if not, we'll definitely get some sort of flashback involving Roger. It was stated directly by Sengoku that Rox was most likely Roger's greatest adversary as well as his first adversary. So you can kind of picture that now. Like when Roger set out on his journey, Rox might have been like, well, at that point, Rox was probably well established as a pirate. Roger was kind of the rookie that was kind of up and coming. Okay, so maybe at that point, you know, what Kaido is to Luffy right now, that was Rox to Roger, right? So Roger's setting out to sea with Rayleigh to begin his journey, and he's like, hey, Rayleigh, I hear there's this really strong pirate in the New World called Roxy Xebec. We should go and fight him. And Rayleigh's like, oh, you can't mess with Roxy Xebec. Might be something like that. Eventually, spoiler alert, Roger did in fact mess with Roxy Xebec, along with Garp though, okay? So there's a whole story there. I'm sure when we finally get Roger's backstory, the one that's like focused entirely on him, because remember, Odin's flashback, while it did include Roger, that was near the end of Roger's journey. In fact, that was the very end of Roger's journey, his last year. But there's a lot of other stuff that Roger did that we need to like learn about, okay? And I'm sure during that flashback with Roger, Rox will probably be the primary antagonist, okay, that Roger will have to deal with, okay? And there might even be a situation where, because it was implied that the only way Roger was able to beat him was because Garp was helping him out. So there might have been a situation where Rox was just definitively stronger than Roger. And this is Roger at his heyday, okay? This was when Roger, before he got the illness and everything, near the end when he met Odin and everybody. This was Roger at his strongest, might have been defeated by Rox in a one-on-one fight. And it wasn't until he teamed up with Garp was he able to actually defeat the guy at God Valley, okay? So a lot of stuff to unpack with Rox. This is one of those things where you go back and you read chapter 957, which is literally just called Ultimate. And it's where Sengoku is just explaining to a bunch of random Marines, to be honest with you. Like, none of the admirals or vice admirals were there. I guess maybe some vice admirals we haven't met. But just some random Marines just sitting in a freaking meeting room. And Sengoku's there munching on some potato chips. And he has his pet goat. And he's like, hey, you guys want to hear about the storied, mysterious past of the One Piece world? And it's like, yeah, sure, let's do that. It's like, cool. And then after this, we'll have an after party where freaking Brand New reveals the bounties of all of the Yonkos. So that was a pretty intense chapter, right? And that was only between Act 2 and 3 of Wano. Can you believe what's going to happen between Act 3 and 4 of Wano? It'll be insane. Okay. But every time I go back and read that chapter or I watch the episode, I pick up more and more stuff, you know, that's kind of like the underlying image of, I think, what Oda's trying to, like, paint here with Rox and how his crew operated, okay? So we all know the basic story. The basic story is that Rox got his crew together on Hachinosu Island, the pirate paradise, way back in the day. And that crew included Whitebeard, Big Mom, Kaido, Shiki, Silver Axe, Captain John. Captain John was also also there. I think there was some other dude, of course, I think his name was Wang Shi! Yeah, he was there too. Anyway, got all this massive crew together of the biggest heavy hitters right now in the story, back when they were in like their formative years, okay? And they sailed the Grand Line and conquered it. Rox wanted to become king of the world. That's the only explanation for his ultimate end goal, was king of the world. So gonna have to unpack that in a second. Eventually it all came to a head at God Valley when Garp and Roger teamed up and defeated him. Supposedly Garp and Roger killed Rox, is what, like, I guess Sengoku, basically the way he talked about it, like, you know, Rox is long dead now. Rox's middle initial was the D, same as Roger. God Valley vanished from the world at that point, just disappeared, and the only people that really remember this are the Marines that actually were there during that time period. So like Sengoku, Garp, I'm sure Suru, a lot of the old school Marines really remember this kind of stuff. All right, so that's the general idea, but let's unpack this even further and go into like little details that Sengoku brings up, okay? One thing he brings up is the whole reason why the Rox crew even came together on Hachinosu to begin with. It was kind of sort of implied. It doesn't go into great detail, but it was implied. Sengoku said it was because of some money-making scheme. It started out as something simple, just a money-making scheme. They all got together on the Pirate Paradise, and they formed the Rox crew, okay? So I like to think Rox, he was somebody that was really just tethered to his ambition, and that ambition just kept getting more and more haughty, I guess, as it kept going on, all right? I don't think Rox was this brilliant Machiavellian schemer or anything like that. Kind of resembled Blackbeard in a lot of sense, where Blackbeard sort of has all these schemes, but then he also messes up a lot of times too. Like, where it's like, okay, sometimes it seems like he knows exactly what he's doing, and other times he just rushes into Magellan's Poison Dragon without even a second thought, and it doesn't end well for him, right? So maybe the same deal with Rox there, and of course there's plenty of parallels between Rox and Blackbeard. We could be here all day for that. But yeah, I think Rox, you know, he was probably the one that founded the Hachinosu, the Pirate Paradise. The reason there's a giant skull mountain there, that is probably because of Rox using his ability or whatever he did to make it a giant skull, to kind of like show the world, you know, this is the pirate island. You do not mess with the pirate island. Marines, you stay away from the pirate island, okay? You know, the world government, hey, you guys are literally the world government. You have the rest of the world. This is Pirate Paradise, Hachinosu Beehive, full of lead island. You stay away from here unless you want to die, okay? And so I guess the best way to do that is, you know, sculpt the giant mountain like a skull. I think that's pretty standard. Just, you know, hey, stay away from here. Not a good place to hang out, okay? And so Rox started there, and it was probably just like, you know, a pirate paradise. He's like, cool, it's a place we can hang out and get drunk, drink grog, and fight all day and gamble, and no one's gonna bother us, okay? So basically like Vegas. So anyway, eventually, over the years though, Rox probably started to realize, hey, wait a second. This is the pirate paradise that I started, and we got a bunch of freaking, you know, really strong pirates that have been gathering here over the years. I can imagine, like, Whitebeard back in his day before he was even a captain, like, because I think Whitebeard was on a different crew in his really younger years before he got on Rox's crew, okay? So I'm sure a lot of pirates from all around the world gathered at Hachinosu as, like, a vacation, because they knew it was a place they could hang out without the Marines or world government interfering. And that's when Rox got it into his head. He's like, hey, if all of us really strong pirates get together, we could probably make a lot of money. You know, like, think about it. You know, we're gonna, you know, we're pirates. We're all pirates. We're gonna get together. We're gonna attack marine ships and merchant vessels and all these other ships for the world government. We could hit a celestial dragon ship. We could probably get a lot of money doing this. I guarantee you it's probably something very, very simple on how all that started right then and there, okay? And the exact mechanism for how he got all those really strong pirates on his crew, probably the Davy Back. Probably the Davy Back fight started right there on Hachinosu Island, as Robin stated. I already made a whole video about that, where Robin said, like, you know, the Davy Back originated on the Pirate Paradise, and Hachinosu is the Pirate Paradise. So it would make sense that, like, oh, Rox is like, hey, we're going to have a game. We're going to have a tournament, like those ants that fight over in Indonesia. And we're going to get together, and we're going to have this big epic brawl, and whoever wins or whoever survives joins the crew. I'm sure maybe it wasn't life or death games, you know, but it might have been something a lot more brutal than, like, the Groggy Ring or whatever Foxy was doing during the Davy Back Attack arc, okay? But it all started there a lot more brutally with Rox, okay? So he's got his crew together, and then just, you know, after the years of successfully probably amassing a fortune, his ambition just kept growing and growing, getting to the point where Rox is like, you know what? Money doesn't even mean anything to me anymore. What I want is the entire Grand Line. Nay, I want the entire world, you know? And so I don't really think there was some kind of end goal. If there was, it was probably something very ambiguous, like King of the World. It's like, okay, well, what does that mean? It means I'm King of the World. Right, but what does that mean? He's like, I don't know, man. Like, I guess it means I'll topple the world government. But he didn't exactly have, like, any process on how he was gonna do it. Right? He's not like, okay, we're gonna invade Marie-Joie here, here, and here, and we're gonna take out the Celestial Dragons, and probably have to contend with the Admirals right about here. He didn't do any of that. He probably was just running on the high of, like, I'm the greatest pirate, the strongest pirate that ever did pirate, so I'm gonna do whatever I want. And he's like, oh, okay, well, I want to rule the world. All right, well, I'll topple the world government. Guess I'll have to beat up all the Marines and beat up all of the Celestial Dragons, and I'll eventually become the king of the world. So that was probably the general idea there. Something else Sengoku brings up, and a lot of the reasons why we never see Whitebeard mention Rox, or we never really hear, yeah, Big Mom and Kaido sort of talk about their time, but, you know, not publicly or anything like that. They sort of keep it to themselves, is because they hated each other. We find out that life aboard Rox's ship was very brutal, where they would just often fight to the death on the ship. You know, Rox was probably not a very orderly captain. You know, he would walk out and be like, hey, what's going on today? I'm Captain Rox. He's like, ah, Captain Rox, check it out. Our one navigator is having a fight with our cook. You know, if you're a normal captain, you'd be like, oh, we need both of those. Let's stop the fight. No, he's like, I have 20,000 berries on the cook. He can handle those knives pretty well. Although the navigator does have the pen, and the pen is mightier than the sword. You know what? I'll also bet on the navigator, right? And so they just brawl on the ship, and people would die constantly. It was a very rough and tumble kind of crew. And also, as it was stated, they hated each other. Like Whitebeard did not really care for Big Mom and Kaido. Big Mom cared for Kaido. That, you know, Big Mom referred to Kaido as like her little brother while they were on board the ship. Kaido was an apprentice pirate, so he was probably a teenager during that time period. But I'm sure like Shiki didn't get along with Silver Axe. I'm sure Captain John didn't get along with Wang Ji. You know, like they really hated each other. But it was probably like they were in too deep at that point, right? They were like already on this great pirate crew that was like storming up and down the Grand Line, wiping out the Marines, wiping out the world government, Rox himself trying to become king of the world. You know, they couldn't really split off at that point. You know, they were kind of there. So it's like, all right, if we split off, we're probably just going to get defeated. So we got to stay here on this crew, but we really don't like each other. Okay, that was kind of the idea. It really does speak, I don't know whether to Rox's charisma or how he ran a ship or his straight up strength, like how strong he was to keep all of these different minded people all together in one crew. All right, it could have been a thing, like I said, his charisma was just so good, that's why they stuck around. Or he could have just been so redonkulously strong that it's just like, all right, you know, we don't like each other, but Rox is the strongest person in the world. So, you know, as long as we stay with him, it should be okay. He's like invincible. Might have been something like that. Because later on, like Whitebeard, we learned that Whitebeard wasn't ever really interested in treasure or finding the One Piece or toppling the world government. Whitebeard was only interested in having a family, which seems the opposite of what the Rox crew was from what Sengoku was saying. You know, they didn't view each other as family. That probably just made Whitebeard want to become his own captain even more. But there was something tethering him to Rox. The only time they actually left and they finally went off to start their own crews individually was after God Valley, when Rox apparently died. That was the thing that severed them. You know, they didn't leave beforehand, so there had to be something else. Could have been that code of honor that pirates also talk about. Like Big Mom just mentioned it a few chapters ago when she found out that Kaido's crew were the ones that attacked Okobore town. You know, Big Mom was like, you know, we might be pirates, we might be the worst of the worst, but even we still have a code of honor. That code of honor was probably something she learned while on Rox's crew, okay? So if Rox did the Davy back fight and he's just like, all right, we're going to hold a tournament or we're going to hold these games, and if you lose and I win, you got to join my crew, and if you win, you can go do whatever. And Whitebeard agreed, and Big Mom agreed, and Kaido agreed, all the pirates agreed, and they all individually lost, and they joined Rox's crew. And so Whitebeard might not have liked it. He might wanted to go off and start his own crew with his own family and everything, but he's like, hey, this is the pirate code. You know, I'm bound by my honor as a pirate to stay here on Rox's crew. I agreed to the terms and I lost, so that's why I'm here. Until death do us part, I guess. And then, you know, Rox died, so they all left, all right? So keep that in mind. It was a very rough and tumble kind of pirate crew. Already talked about Roger, greatest enemy. We already mentioned that. Battled to the death at God Valley. Let's talk about God Valley itself, okay? Because I picked up something here. The first time I read this, I didn't really pick up on the underlying message I think Sengoku was trying to go for here, but now I think I kind of get it, alright? So let me actually pull up the scene here exactly. Let me read it to you. Okay, so here it is. We have a scene where, after Sengoku explains the epic battle with Garp and Roger fighting Rox at God Valley, the Marines are like, we've never even heard of God Valley. Where is it? It's not on any map. You know, where did this epic showdown of, like, you know, mythological Greek god proportions occur, right? Sengoku responds, that's because you will not find any map featuring an island called God Valley. As a matter of fact, God Valley itself vanished without a trace. For some reason, I always had it in my head that Sengoku said that it sank beneath the waves. Maybe that was like in a first translation I read or whatever, but in the anime and in the official Viz version, he doesn't actually say it sank beneath the waves. He literally says it just vanished. And you see a scene in the anime where it's there and then pop, gone. Alright, so it's vanished. Now, Sengoku goes on to say this, and this is some, like, I want you to see if you could get the undertones of what he's probably laying out here to the Marines. The island the world government wanted to hide disappeared entirely. Do you still want to hear about it? And then the Marines all kind of like, that's okay. I thought that was like originally Sengoku's like, oh, do you still want to hear about it? I'll tell you. No. The underlying tone there is this. Sengoku was basically like this. He's like, yeah, it's an island that the world government really wanted to go and just disappear. And then it disappeared. I think Sengoku's basically like, read between the lines, guys. It's like, the world government made it disappear. You question this, you might be the next person to disappear. Then the Marines were all like, we get it. There's some Marine in the back. Like, I want to hear more about it, Sengoku. He's like taking notes, writing a book. The other Marines are like, no, Dave, no. He's like, oh, but I want to hear about God Valley. No. Oh, I get. Yeah. Don't mention it, okay? Which brings to question why Sengoku is even in this room. Like, he's like, hey, you want to hear about all this top secret stuff that could get you kicked out of the Marines and possibly exterminated by the world government? Alright, so our story begins 38 years ago. I guess the idea is, like, Sengoku just doesn't give a shit anymore, because Sengoku, you know, he's seen a lot of stuff in his day, alright? He was the fleet admiral, he was an admiral before that, he's seen a lot of crap. So I think Sengoku's getting to the point where, like, listen, this world is spiraling into a new era. I don't even know what the hell is gonna go down anymore. We got Yonkos teaming up, we got freaking Luffy becoming the 5th emperor, we got Blackbeard having 2 devil fruits. Sengoku's there like, you know, there's a reason I retired from this shit. I don't even know what's gonna go down anymore. But whatever does happen, I'm going to bring you guys up to speed on it. You're the Marines of the future generation. You should know everything that the older generation knows. Even if the upper echelon doesn't want us to tell you, I'm gonna tell you, alright? I guess I won't go into super explicit detail with, like, everything that happened, because obviously Sengoku knows everything about the Will of D and stuff. He's explained that, like, in an SBS or a Viva card, I think Oda explained it. But so, Sengoku's not gonna go that much into detail, but he's like, you guys should know about this battle that occurred, you know, 38 years ago. I feel like that's important, and then you should know more about Roger and Garp, and you should, I think more than anything, maybe with that story, Sengoku was probably trying to, like, get it into the Marines' heads of, like, you might have to team up with pirates to stop a greater evil. That's the point of the story, because the Marines were shocked when they learned that Garp, the hero of the Marines, the Fist himself, teamed up with the king of the pirates, the person he apparently was chasing all of his life. And so I think that's what Sengoku was trying to get across. He's like, listen, you know, if Blackbeard or Kaido and Big Mom get out of hand at some point, you might have to, you young Marines might have to team up with some really strong pirates like the Supernovas or the Straw Hats or whatever to stop this greater evil. Try to understand the world is not black and white. It's a lot more of a mire of gray. okay? And so you have to choose. You have to make that decision. Don't let the world government make it for you. Don't let the Marines make it for you. You might have to make that decision. So I think that's what Sengoku was trying to go about there, involving what they might have to do, you know? Because if worst comes to worst and Blackbeard enacts Rox's will, and even if Blackbeard is not like a blood relative of Rox, which is a popular theory, if he's just how Luffy carries on the will of Roger, Rox's will is carried on by Blackbeard, and Blackbeard gets so damn powerful, he gets to the point where he can actually take over the world. It's like, okay, Marines, if you gotta team up with the Straw Hats to defeat Blackbeard, you better make that right call. You know what I mean? You might want to do what you have to do in that situation. And at the same time, Sengoku's like, listen, I'm an old man. I might not be able to help you very much. I mean, I could turn into a giant golden Buddha and shoot shockwaves, but, you know, my hip's kind of acting up lately. I don't know what I'm gonna do. But my point is, yeah, that's the situation there. The world government also covered up Rox's entire existence, not just getting rid of God Valley, which, by the way, yeah, let's pause that for a moment. Let's go back to God Valley. How did the world government make an entire damn island disappear? You might say Buster Call. You might just say Buster Call. But, you know, Buster Call, there's a difference between obliterating an island with explosives and then just having it vanish. Like, people still know Ohara was there. It's just a bombed out ruin, but the island, I would assume, is still there. Eni's Lobby was still there. In fact, it's implied Eni's Lobby was built up again. You know, they Buster Called it, but then they fixed it up, was the general idea that I got. So I don't think it was a Buster Call. And the way Sengoku described it, you think Sengoku would have just said it was a Buster Call. It was a Buster Call and they got obliterated. No, he just it's gone. It was there, then it's just disappeared. So that implies the world government has some mechanism, some means. Maybe it's a devil fruit, maybe it's an ancient weapon, maybe it's something else that allows them to just, I don't know, teleport islands into the ether or into another parallel dimension or something. Because, you know, he didn't say it sank beneath the waves. He didn't say it got blasted into the sky or it didn't get Buster Called into oblivion. It's just gone. All right, so yeah, that might be something there, and that might follow back to what the Gorosei were talking about with their the purge. Basically, they were walking to Im-sama's chamber with the empty throne. It's like, we might have to do another cleansing, another purge. That might be something they were implying to, like, where the world government, they don't like to do this because rewriting history, I mean, they're the ones that kind of control the world, but people are going to still ask questions, and the poneglyphs are still around. So they probably don't want to do this very often, but every once in a while, when something gets really out of hand, they can just erase islands from existence, and then rewrite all the history books, and then if anybody asks any questions, purge time. You know, that's how it goes. And not just God Valley itself, but all of Rox's exploits. That's why none of the Marines know about Rox, okay? Sengoku just simply said, they broke one too many taboos, which is what caused the world government to just try to erase them from history, okay? So that brings up even more questions. What taboos did Rox and his crew break? Because look at all the exploits that the Straw Hats are going with right now. The Straw Hats broke into Eni's Lobby, the judiciary island of the world government, shot down the flag of the world government, essentially declaring war on them right then and there, and then because of those exploits, the entire Eni's Lobby island got blown to smithereens, and then later, Luffy punched out a celestial dragon, boom, right there in front of an entire crowd of people. And it seems to imply whatever the hell Rox was up to was even worse than that. Although, who knows, because it's implied after Rox died, after he was no longer a threat, that's when the world government decided to take, like, a sponge to all this and started, like, wiping it clean, okay? Like, alright, Rox is dead, God Valley, gone. Nobody ever talk about him again. We're just going to remove all the history books. We're not even going to have him mentioned, okay? But he did all these crazy things. We're just erasing him, okay? Now, Luffy and the rest of the supernovas are still alive, so it would probably be kind of hard to erase history while it's still happening. But make no mistake, I feel like that's part of what the Gorosei were talking about with the cleansing. Like, you know, after we get rid of all those supernovas, after Luffy and Eustace Kid and Law and everybody gets wiped out and removed, after Kaido and Big Mom die, we should probably remove them from the history books too. We'll just say that there was a time of unfettered peace, and there was so much peace that we didn't even need to, like, write about it. You know, there was no history. There was like a second Void Century. That would be cool, right? All this crazy stuff going on right now. Let's say Luffy fails. Let's say he doesn't find the One Piece. Let's say the Marines and the world government end up winning, and they just wipe out the Straw Hats, the rest of the Supernovas. They wipe out Kaido. They wipe out Big Mom, Blackbeard, Shanks. Let's say the world government were to win. You think that they would just write all that in the books? No, they would say, oh, yeah, Void Century Take 2, you know? Take 2. So yeah, stuff happened in the Void Century, and then it was just peace and prosperity for a few hundred years. And then we got to another point, which was so much peace that we didn't write about it, and then continuing on to the future. That's probably what they would do, right? I don't think Luffy's going to get a point in the book, right? So yeah, that's the situation there with the government. Now, what about Rox himself? Did he die? The thing is with One Piece, and as I mentioned earlier with the inherited will, we don't have to have this be a thing like in Naruto where Kaguya was mentioned to be mythical and she was like a rabbit goddess that lived a long time ago, and then boom, she has to appear in the final act. We can have the rest of this story without Rox appearing in the present timeline, okay? And still have the impact of Blackbeard being his successor, whether it be by blood relation or just carrying on the will of D that Rox also had, okay? So we could still have that. And we can also still have a pretty badass flashback involving Roger and Rox, okay? So that's all I'm saying right now. But if Oda does want to bring Rox back, he's kind of setting the groundwork for it right now, where it's like, okay, the first time we hear about Rox was right before Reverie started, when Garp was talking about him. He name-dropped him. And then about 50 chapters later, right here, we learn a little bit more about Rox from Sengoku. And so we're still in the middle of Wano right now. We still have a lot of stuff happening. So after Wano has concluded, that's going to be a few more months, maybe even closer to a year until Wano is over. The Straw Hats might have another story. If Oda is very careful with this and drops subtle hints throughout the way, a lot of buildup, and it's like, okay, Rox will return. He might be a zombie, he might be an old dude, he might be like, well, let's see here, 38 years ago is when Rox was defeated, so he was probably like, I don't know, in his 40s or 50s back then, so he would probably be at least in his 80s right now, if not 90s, if not older. Might be closer to Kureha's age for all we know. You know, he could come back as an old man. There could be a thing where Blackbeard ends up meeting Rox or something, or maybe Blackbeard met Rox and that's what set him on his ambition. Maybe Blackbeard killed Rox in his old age or something, right? I'm just saying there is a way to do this. Like with Naruto, for example, I wasn't really on board with the Kaguya thing, but with Madara, after we learned so much about him, and then we find out later that he did live to an old age, and he was like on life support, and he was talking to Obito. That's why I think Madara should have just been the final villain of Naruto and just left it there at that, right? Instead of all the other people that came after him, because Madara was established, and so by the time we learned that Madara was like properly revived, it's like, okay, that makes sense, because we learned a lot of stuff before. But, you know, with Rox, if it's gonna happen where Rox is just gonna come back, like God Valley, the world government had some sort of device to send God Valley into a different dimension altogether, and Rox got sent along with it, and now he's trapped in a parallel dimension in the ether, you know, on God Valley, and he can't get off. It's like that scene in freaking Pirates of the Caribbean 3 when Johnny Depp is just on that ship amid like the white void or whatever. Not a great movie, but it's kind of like that, right? Okay? And so he's just in this void, and maybe he doesn't age or whatever like Samurai Jack, and then finally he gets sent back into reality, and he's like, I'm back to conquer the world. Could be something like that. It's just, I'm okay with it. I think it could fit in the One Piece story. We already have time travel, so we can have interdimensional travel too. Why not, right? Makes sense to me. And so, that might even be Eames' power. That might be Eames' Devil Fruit ability. Dimensional warping. People thought time travel was going to be the end-all, be-all, strongest devil fruit. It is a pretty strong devil fruit, but it's definitely not the strongest from the way Toki displayed it and how she explained how it worked. But some kind of devil fruit that can, like, warp dimensions. Yeah, that seems pretty OP. That seems pretty ridiculously overpowered. Maybe it could be a Logia. You could just turn into, like, dimensional, like, goo or something. I don't know, like a warpy kind of dimensional state or something. I don't know. But if that was Eames' power, Eam has that ability to, like, snap his fingers and just pop things out of existence, or not out of existence, but like, I'm gonna send you to another realm, another reality, where you can't interact with my planet anymore. I'm Im-sama. I'm the supreme ruler of the world government. Everything in the world is what I want it to be. Except he doesn't do it very often. Like, why you could say if he did have that power, why doesn't he use it against Luffy or the Yonko or whatever? It's probably a very, very particular thing where he only does that when he absolutely needs to. Like, Rocks might have actually succeeded or gotten really close to succeeding. God Valley is, of course, the ancestral homeland of the Celestial Dragons, from what we understand. Probably the place where they lived, maybe before they, well, I guess they lived in Marijois, like, during the Void Century, but that might have been their ancestral place, or, like, the Holy Ground, where they raised their dragons or whatever. And, you know, Rocks might have, you know, succeeded in destroying it. And then after everything was over, after the fight with Roger and Garp and Roger, Garp, and Rocks, maybe Eam decided, I'm going to try to get rid of all of them at once. I'm going to erase everybody at once, and it didn't work. He got rid of God Valley, he got rid of Rocks, but he couldn't get rid of Roger, and so that's what happened there. Maybe something like that. Also, Eam is trying to stay secret. He doesn't want the rest of the world to know that he's the supreme ruler, so every time a big, strong pirate emerges in the world, he can't leave his throne and go over and warp them away, right? Because that might raise too many questions, you know? And maybe Eam just doesn't want to do it himself. He's just like, I'm only going to get involved when it really does look like the world government is going to fall. Like, when it's like the final hour, then I will make my appearance and do my magic to warp things away. That is very well, if that is the ability, if that is what happened with God Valley, just warped away to another realm. Okay, and if that's the situation, we could have this other parallel dimension where it's literally every single thing that the world government doesn't want to know about. It's like their trash bin that they just throw everything into. As long as we're going along with this extra dimensional plot, maybe that's what happened to the last poneglyph. The world government found this poneglyph or whatever, and they're just like, oh, it's the last road poneglyph. Well, we have to make sure we can't destroy it, but we have to make sure nobody ever finds it again. Warp. Maybe. I don't know. It's a lot of questions. I guess maybe not, because Eam did have like that secret vault underneath Marijois that had the giant straw hat or whatever. Maybe the corpse of Joy Boy is down there. I don't know. And if that was the case, if he did have some sort of warping power, I guess why would he even bother having that like secret vault or whatever, right? But at any rate, I'm not sure. Thanks for watching the video though, guys, and thank you for listening to my ant facts. So yeah, let me know what you think is up with Rocks, if he's still alive, or if his will is just, you know, carried on by Blackbeard and that's all there's going to be to it, or what the ability to remove God Valley from existence was, or what was Rocks' ability. Was it just ridiculous, like, powerful hockey? Did he have, like, master cap in every single type of hockey? Did he have some crazy devil fruit to, like, shake the world? Maybe Rocks had, like, Dragon's fruit before Dragon had it, and Dragon's is regarded as, like, one of the strongest. He's the most wanted man in the world. Dragon, if he could literally manipulate storms and shit, that would make sense as, like, one of the strongest devil fruits ever. Maybe Rocks had it, then he died and got reincarnated into Dragon. Who knows? Anyway, thanks for watching. This will be Tekking and Berries signing out.